Let's start with meditation. I invite you to take a deep breath. Notice how your body feels right now. Maybe you would like to close your eyes or relax your gaze. Whether you're here physically or watching us online. How does your body feel? How is your emotional state right now? Just notice it without judgment. Notice how you're feeling, how you're being. Feeling the weight of your body, supported by the chair. Feel the presence of the divine. Feel the presence of spirit all around you, in you. Feel the presence of oneness. Let us enter into the silence for a few moments to connect with that oneness, that presence of spirit. We are grateful for this time together. We are grateful for the presence. Grateful for the presence of God, of peace, of light and illumination living in, through, and as us. We give thanks and we say together, and so it is. Amen. Well, I want to welcome all of you here tonight. Thank you for being here. I've been thinking about so much that I'm grateful for. Family, wonderful congregants, beautiful place, my wife, some of the people that I'm close to in my life. You know, it's interesting. I mean, it's good to have money, and certainly money is helpful, but it's interesting when I stop and think and feel what it is I'm most grateful for. It's people and my connection with spirit that most comes up. It's relational. And for me, that's a huge aspect of prosperity. Are all of those rich relationships that I could not put any amount of money on, you know? So when someone acts or talks like they're poor, I realize that it's a matter of consciousness. It's a matter of them being out of relationship. Because when we're in relationship with others, with ourselves, with God, then we realize there really is no lack. When I was in India, I became very close friends with a person in Vrindavan, India, and he had me come to his home. Now, when some of the monks heard about it, they said, "Oh, you should be very careful and cautious about that, because you don't know who you might be getting mixed up with." But I assured them that I felt very safe in doing this. Anyway, he led me through these alleyways and these areas where people live very closely together, but they have kind of cement walls and locks on the front to keep themselves safe. It was a very, very, very simple home. I didn't see what we would think of as opulence. I didn't see what we would think of as having a lot. But his mom came out and she insisted on feeding me. She was just running here and there, grabbing what she could to feed me. And I thought, that's prosperity. Is that connection, that relationship. And before I came down here to class, I just needed to talk with my mom. And she just needed to talk to me, as it turned out. So we had this long talk, and I thought, oh, I wonder if I'm going to make it to class, and would they be okay if I came late, because I didn't want to stop her. And I thought, how rich I am. And that richness comes out of giving. You can't be in a relationship without giving, or it doesn't work very well. If you're in a relationship, you have to learn how to give, how to forgive, how to get outside of yourself. I remember talking with a sweet lady, beautiful lady, and I don't believe what she said, but I thought it was very interesting. She had been single her entire life. I'm not sure if she had ever had a close, relationship, like a significant other or like that. And she had grown up as a Quaker, and just a beautiful spirit. And she was talking to me about marriage one day. And she said she thought it was good that she had never gotten married, because she said, I'm too selfish. She was saying that about herself. Now, she was one of the least selfish people I had ever met. But I took some truth from what she was saying. That when you're in relationship, it doesn't work to just be stingy and holding to yourself. Any kind of relationship. So if we're in a committed relationship with one another, if you have a significant other, or you're talking with some close friends, it's very important that there's giving and receiving, right? Have you ever been in a relationship where where it wasn't reciprocal? That didn't take long. Do we have any handheld mics? Right behind me. Oh yeah, they're there. So, what did it feel like? I mean, just briefly. You don't have to go take us through the whole difficulty of it, but what did it feel like to be in a relationship that was not reciprocal? Anyone care? Okay, I'm looking at Debbie because I've never seen Debbie quite so emphatic right off the bat.
Yes. Not reciprocal relationship where I wasn't respected,
Mm-hmm.
where I was told how I should act,
Mm-hmm.
how I should be,
Mm-hmm.
who I should be with, my own friends. It was not. After 12 years.
12 years.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't give up easily, do you?
No. And
That's commendable.
I was committed to do everything in my power to make it work.
Yeah.
And at one point, it just wasn't happening anymore.
Right.
And
Wow. Thank you for your willingness to share that. I mean, others of you have been, I mean, maybe all of us at some point. You want to share briefly about that, Joanne?
I was thinking, as you said, somebody who told you what to do and how to do it and who to be with. That reminds me of my mother. So we don't tend to, she's not my significant other in some ways. But I mean, and she was, I love her, but how many of us treat children in a way that doesn't honor or respect them as an individual? That's just that's the piece that came up for me.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Mary, you want to say something about?
I have a totally different take. All relationships have something going on between the two people where there is giving and taking. It's when it's out of balance.
Right.
I mean, I was in a relationship with a man at one time in my life, one of my husbands. Anyway, one of them. And he was able to begrudgingly give, but there were other things that he gave freely, which was very beneficial to me. It wasn't what I wanted, though, in the relationship. I think we have to be careful of that. Because is reciprocal? Are you looking at that person and saying, well, you're not giving me what I want? That's one thing. But if they're giving what they can give, there is a reciprocity going on. You wouldn't be together because
that's
it's
a good point.
It's not possible to be in any kind of a relationship and have something that isn't not being done for you. It's just, what is it? How balanced is it? And is it what you want to receive from a person?
That's good. These are very good principles, but you don't know where I'm leading to yet. And let me get there. We're going to be looking tonight at giving and receiving. And the balance of that, because that's part of prosperity. And it's in giving what we're able to and giving in what is right for us to give. So just before, I brought my phone. Where did I put it? Oh, yeah. So just before I walked down here, someone from Wichita who, I don't want to give away too much information because I didn't get her permission, but I'll just put it this way. She's a social activist in Wichita that stands up for people who often do not have the voices of faith, the voices of the church standing up for them. And I was one of those who was standing with her in a lot of that and was encouraging her. And she was so touched by my involvement that she started to attend the church there. I don't know if she still is, but she sent me this message, and it just came out of the blue. I have to share it. If you're watching, I'm not giving your name, but thank you. I was really touched by this. Aw, she sent all these hearts in response. Thank you for being an ally to me, for being supportive and also showing me what an inclusive church can look like. Thank you for being a visible ally to so many and showing the world that love can come from the church too. Who would have thought that love can come from the church too? As if that's not our primary message, and that meant a whole lot to me. That came to me just before I walked down here to class. And I'm thinking, okay, there were some things that in some of the things that I did in Wichita, yeah, I had to take on some things. I had to do some things that most people were unwilling to do. But I received so much out of that. And there's this story, I think it's in Eric Butterworth's book, of an itinerant minister who would travel from place to place to speak, and he came to a church, and they had an offering box like back by the door, and so he put some money into it, even though he was the speaker for that Sunday. And afterwards, the minister of the church or whatever said, well, this is not a very prosperous church, so whatever has been put into the love offering box is what the itinerant minister gets. It's like, oh, okay. And his son was with him, so he opened the box. And what was in the box was exactly what he had put into it. And he thought, okay, well, that's the way it is. So, that was his offering. And so his son was thoughtful about that. And as they were walking home, he said, Dad, if you would have put more in, you would have gotten more out of it. And, it just sort of illustrates the principle that when we put something, if our heart is in it, and to me, the whole idea of tithing and giving is about that. It's about giving from our heart. And it's not just about tithing, which when I speak of tithing, I'm speaking of 10%. Could be 10% of our gross income. It could be 10% of your net profits from a business, 10%. Or your love offerings, and here we're not like legalistic about it. It's about, and if you read Fillmore and Butterworth on their sections on giving and tithing, you'll see some interesting differences between what the two of them say. It's the only area where I see some differences in the books, but the same principles are there. It's about giving from the heart. It's about giving cheerfully and joyfully. It's like those relationships. We're not hopefully just takers or observers, but if someone has contributed something to us, like I went to an ashram in India, and I thought it was all planned in advance. I didn't realize some monks had split off from the ashram, kind of stolen stuff from that website, had formed their own thing. I didn't know who I was dealing with ahead of time. And so I arrived at this ashram. I didn't know they had no idea I was coming. And they treated me like royalty. it wasn't until later that I found out that that was completely spontaneous. They had no idea who I was. They treated me like royalty when I came, and they had no idea who I was. And they gave so much to me. They didn't charge me for staying there or anything. And, you know, it was just in my heart. When I've received so much, to me it's important to share back. Especially with an ashram that feeds, clothes, schools the poorest of the poor children for free. Where for $150 a year, $150 a year, they can feed, clothe, school, house a child for free. $150. I mean, it was mind-blowing to me. And I got to work with these teachers and these children. So for me, it was just very natural to want to give. So it's a little hard for me to understand if people don't want to. To me, that's like being in that relationship where the other person wants to be a taker and not a giver. And I'd like for us to tonight look at that whole subject of giving and receiving. Jesus said, in the measure you give, you will receive. I mean, that's a spiritual law. And it's not just about finances. I was hoping that Judy would still be here, but Levitt still is, so I can brag on him. And on Sean. I think Sean's back there. I mean, oh, Sean's at the camera. Of course. Yeah, all right. Thank you, Sean. I mean, I think about some of the things that people do, and I was just thinking about this class. People setting the class up while I'm up there on the phone talking with my mom. People who are getting the live streaming going so that we can communicate with those who could not be here physically. And thank you for coming. And I'm so touched by that spirit of giving. That's also a form of giving, is the volunteer service. The volunteer service that people on the board give, or that people in the prayer chaplaincy program give, or people who teach, or who help volunteer and do things here, or who volunteer with some other areas. I was talking with somebody this morning who was talking about her volunteer work, where she meets with chemotherapy patients, and it's a volunteer thing, and fits them for weeks. You know, there's all kinds of ways to serve others. All kinds of ways. I personally don't like to be in a relationship that doesn't have some giving and receiving. And I think that's because that's how we're built. It's important for us to enter into that whole spirit of giving and receiving cheerfully and joyfully. Keith, you had your hand up. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, to me the gift is in the giving. And I don't really keep track of what somebody does for me because I've already been given a gift. And I don't really get into reciprocity because that's not why I am giving to someone. I don't keep track of what they did or what I do. And when I do any kind of giving, whether it's volunteer, I've already been recognized and paid for that. And I don't keep a balance sheet, and I don't give to get something. To me, I've already been given something, and the gift is there, and it makes me happy. It makes me feel a value that I've already given something without even thinking about having, we'll say, to be recognized or paid. So for me, the gift is in the giving, and I don't even, that's enough for me, and I don't look for any kind of recognition, and I'm not looking to get something in return for it. I like that much better because I don't have to keep a balance sheet. It's same thing with money, you know. I don't loan money. I give money. I don't want to be keeping, and I've already been paid back on that in many ways. So, but I don't look for the receiving. I've already, by giving, I immediately get it already, and that's so much easier for me, and it makes me happy. And I don't have the expectations that I'm going to receive something because I've gotten it already immediately.
Good. Thank you, Keith. Thank you. Yeah, I like that. What you're talking about is the joy that you experience in giving. I don't know if people believe me when I say on Sunday mornings about the joy of giving, but there really is. And there's lots of ways to give, but there is a tremendous amount of joy in giving. The person who does not know how to give is a miserable person. And I've seen some.
They don't think they are enough or have enough. It seems to me, I'll learn how to...
So people can hear you.
Okay. It seems to me that when we're unable to give, it's because we don't feel enough or that we have enough. And not having enough goes back to being enough, I think.
That's a good point.
And the other thing that keeps coming to me is that if I don't give, then I don't present an opportunity to other people to receive.
Yes.
So the joy that they get in receiving is stopped by my inability to get joy from giving. Yeah. Anyway, it's so receiving.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you remember that story? Jesus was sitting in the temple, and he was watching people put their money in. And there was a woman who put in 2 very, very small coins, you know. I mean, it wasn't, in terms of comparison to other money, wasn't worth that much. But Jesus saw her giving everything that she had to live on. And so he said, this woman gave way more than the other people did. I still have just a little bit of a cough, and it comes up if I talk. And what do I do for a living? Anyway, so he saw this woman put in, you know, these 2 little bits. And he praised her for what she was able to do, giving from her heart. So I really think that's the important thing, is really giving from our heart. So, have others of you experienced that kind of joy? Joy? You radiate joy. You do. When I look at your face, you just radiate joy. If you ever forget Joy's name, just look at her face. You're welcome, and I mean it. There's lots of ways in which we can give to others. Catherine?
I have a thought about that. I think I opened up one of the books. I think it was one of these 2 books, and it said, think about the very first time you ever gave. And I remember that. I was in 3rd grade, and we had to give something. I think it was going to go to help children or something. I think it was like that. And I remember I had saved, 3rd grade, $6, which was a lot of money when I was in 3rd grade. And I gave that, and to this day, I remember the joy. It was the highest joy I had experienced in life to that point, and probably some of the highest I experienced for a very, very long time. And I'll never forget it, just the level of joy. And I recognized how much giving makes me happy and joyful.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You know, Yeah, I've shared with you all that my dad on Saturday nights would be preparing his Sunday school lesson, and he'd also be writing out his tithe check as he was sitting there doing his Sunday school lesson. And as a child, I asked him, "What are you doing writing a check on Saturday night?" And he said, "This is for church in the morning. I want to be ready. I want to give it in a spirit of thanksgiving. I want to be prepared. So when I give, I can really give in the way that I intend and give cheerfully." And I think he even said to me, and I think this is good teaching. He said, "Maybe someday you'll think about whether or not you want to give something at church." And I thought about that, And I remember as a child, probably second or third grade, getting a box of those offering envelopes. And it was for me. It had my name on it. And each envelope was numbered for each Sunday of the year. It was a whole year of envelopes. And I remember putting my offering in that first several times in those envelopes. And I remembered feeling such joy and gratitude and something else, which this just occurred to me while we were talking, that as a child, I felt, and I don't know if I could have put it into these words, I felt a part of ownership in the church. And so when I put my offering into the offering plate, I thought, wow, I get to participate too because this is my church. I get to participate like adults do. I get to help support what happens here. And when I started doing that, I started taking more interest in what was going on there. I became a member of the church. I got baptized. I started doing various things because I realized that I wasn't there just to receive. I was there to give also. And I was taught that at a very early age. So, in the bylaws committee, and there's all kinds of different points on this. I don't want to debate this point. But in the bylaws committee, we were looking at, should we have age limits for members? What should the age limit be? This, that, and the other thing. I'm just speaking from my own experience. I'm glad the church I grew up in did not have age limits on membership. Because as a second grader, I wanted to be a part of that church. I wanted to contribute. I knew it was a church that I belonged to, and I had a sense of ownership in it. At second grade, I knew that. So I don't know that you can arbitrarily say, well, at this age, a kid knows what they're doing, and at this age, they don't. How can you say, right? Jesus was teaching the rabbis and experts in the law as a 12-year-old in the temple. So, even as a child, we can understand those things. And this spiritual community, I believe, is enhanced when people take a sense of ownership and responsibility in it. That we're not just here to be spectators. If you're a spectator, that's okay. But there's so much more growth and development and learning that can come by volunteering, giving of our time, getting involved, giving of our tithes and offerings. Just like that itinerant preacher, we get more out of it if we put more into it. Someone had their hand up. Yeah.
You can tell I'm an early childhood person.
Yes.
That is so true. Montessori, who is an Italian doctor, MD, and became had her Montessori movement in education. Children, by the time they enter the classroom, are always giving or contributing to the class.
Yes.
They sweep the floor, they clean up the messes, they put everything back, they water the plants, they do anything and everything in the classroom because they participate in it and it belongs to them and there's ownership there.
Right.
The difference in the behavior of children who have normalized in a Montessori classroom are extremely different from those in almost any classroom you'll see, even if it's another private school. And they love it. They love feeling strong about who they are.
Yeah.
And they
Makes
feel
sense.
efficacious and worthwhile. And when you feel worthwhile and you know you are, then you grow up to be an adult who is.
Yes.
So
That's beautiful. Good. The church in Wichita, we had a green team. The green team was looking at all kinds of practices throughout the church where we could be more ecologically responsible, be a greener church. So we were washing dishes rather than throw away stuff. We were recycling what we could. We were looking at cutting down on our carbon footprint, And so we got the youth department involved. So there would be a youth ambassador, someone from the youth department that was responsible each week to take out the recyclables, to encourage people to put the recyclables in the recycling bins and so forth. All right, so when you have a child demonstrating and modeling to you better ways to take care of the planet, there's a certain power in that. Jesus spoke of, if you want to enter the kingdom of heaven, become like a little child. Little children can teach us so much, and I saw in their act of service and their giving towards those green efforts, it was harder for adults to ignore their practices. It was harder if there were children who were instructing them. There are lots of ways all of us can give. No matter our station in life, whether we're children, whether we don't have a lot of formal education, in various ministries I've been a part of, there's been people who have been diagnosed with, big physical illnesses or mental illnesses. And some of the ways in which they touched all of us were just phenomenal. All of us have something that we can give, that we can contribute. Not only our tithes and offerings, but of ourselves. And in whatever we give, it needs to be giving from ourselves, giving from our heart. So if I'm putting the offering in, the offering bowl on Sunday morning, it's not just putting a check in there. It's giving some of me. It's giving my blessing. It's giving some of my heart. If we're giving of our volunteer service, to give really from a spirit of love and giving. It's so important. I used to wonder, why do we put a section in prosperity books about giving and receiving? Well, it's because you're really not experiencing fullness of life if you're wanting to keep everything to yourself. Yeah, it's like holding your breath. How long can you live? I've shared that when I was in college, I was a person that most people had never heard talk. It was just a long phase I went through. But in college, I had a hard time communicating. And when, after I spoke to a church where a lot of college students were present, they're like, wow, I've never heard you talk before. You should talk more often. And what I got from that was I had something to give, but I was keeping it to myself. I had actually been very selfish. So whatever your gifts are, whatever it is that you came into the world to give, we need that. We all need that. And we're being selfish if we don't share it. Does that sound a little harsh? It's true. It's true. I have a very good friend in Wichita, like one of my closest friends. And if he sees me getting withdrawn and pulling away and putting up a barrier, he'll say, Timmy, are you getting shellfish? Like retreating into my shell, but also pointing out how selfish that is. Are you being shellfish? I hope he comes and visits here. He's one of those guys that just tells me what he thinks, you know, and he's saying, I love you, but this is what I think, you know. Those are good friends to have. Does anyone else wish to share about the joy of giving and receiving, any of that?
Long time ago, I had this friend, and she was going to get married and not having a lot of finances available. And so she found, you know, the perfect dress at this perfect price and everything, but she couldn't find the shoes. And she wanted just the perfect shoes. And she was a fellow ballerina. And she said, oh, I know what I want. I want white satin ballet slippers. Well, the only place to get those would be London, and her wedding was going to be way before they would get here from London. We were living in Connecticut at the time. And so I said, well, you know, I have some white fabric left over from my wedding gown, heavy satin, and if you rip up a pair of ballet slippers, I could use those as a pattern, and I made them. And I prayed the whole day. She got married in the morning, and then they went on a little honeymoon in the day. And I prayed. I thought, oh, goodness, now I hope that they last for the day. Well, she came back. Then the next day, she showed me the shoes, and they looked like they'd never been worn. And I just thought, you know, God and the angels took care of her. You know? It was so lovely. Yeah. And it made me feel so good to have such a special role in the day.
That's cool. And that meant a lot to her. And there's things that I think all of us have received that monetarily may not have cost a lot, but because someone was giving from their heart and their time, it just means so much to us. Anybody else wish to share about the joy of giving?
Thank you. I had an interesting thing, so I actually have a question for you.
Oh, question. Yeah, or question.
My question, well, I just got back from China, living in China for 3.5 years. And the people that I worked with, including their children and all that, they decided on Chinese New Year to actually each make videos telling me they love me, they miss me, all that. I'm trying not to cry. It's so beautiful. And I had so much, because, you know, I've given and shared and all that, but I opened my heart to receive to the point where I felt like I was having a heart attack. So my question to you is, you know, we know that love is limitless and we have the capacity to expand the heart. Could there be a physiological, I mean, I literally felt like I was having a heart attack. I was so full of love and gratitude that I literally was hyperventilating. Yes. I had to, I mean, really. So
like
that,
it was
that
almost
scared me a
more
little bit.
than you
So
could take.
It was, it felt more than I could take, but then I wanted to take more.
Right.
So have you ever heard of that?
I've experienced
have you?
it.
I've never. That was my first time actually experiencing that. Yeah, I've just never experienced that before. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Wow. So you really were taking it in. Yeah, that's beautiful. Wow. Well, there's been times with this congregation or with other congregations that I felt so much love. It just felt like it was going to break me open. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm standing here with the mic.
I even questioned. I said, well, is there something wrong with me? I actually called friends and I said, do you think something's wrong with me? Maybe I've got to get a checkup. Because I was willing to open up, but physiologically I felt like panic attack or something physiologically would happen if I really opened up. Yeah.
Right.
It was quite unusual because I'd never experienced that before.
That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you, Joy.
So, you know how Ernest Holmes says there's always a balance of love and law. And so people who are givers, I'm sure all of us are, we've also experienced giving when it's maybe not so good. Maybe you're giving to people who are unappreciative or thing, and you learn where to sort of not give,
Right.
but you have to balance, so you probably had to like stop watching videos, breathe, calm down, come into it like a balance. And I think it's so important to talk about that because I have a friend who's constantly telling me, now, Catherine, if you always breathe out, that's not going to help you. You must breathe in as well.
That's a good.
And so to receive is a blessing. She said, when you receive, you allow others to have that great feeling that you have when you give. And so I love talking about giving, but I also, because I've dumped overboard on it, have to come into balance. Because somebody once said, giving from a place of abundance is wonderful, but if you give from lack, like you don't have, but I'll do it anyway, that burdens the giver and the receiver.
Okay, that's
and
a good point.
That has helped me.
Right,
So.
thank you. Yeah, in one of the Corinthian letters, Paul said, basically gave instructions, at the beginning of each week, let each person set aside according to what they have. That is, according to, not out of what you don't have, but according to what you have. And I think of, riding airplanes and those instructions about first the adult putting the mask on so that they can then help the child. And so it's important for us to give to ourselves as well. Absolutely. Yes, Lauren?
Her.
Yeah, we have to have that.
I had an experience with some people who are studying the course, and it's a wonderful course. The lady who owns the house and opened it every week to us got into an accident with her. She had to have a cast on. So I brought her some food for her and her husband, because I know it's difficult to cook when you're in that sense. And then they didn't really say this, but the next session they said something about giving, and it should be what I got was it should be given out of appreciation, not for trying to get something or whatever.
Right.
So, and then there was another time where I really couldn't afford it, but I bought these beautiful earrings, And I think it was because I wanted to befriend this young lady who I found out a couple of years later, she didn't even remember who gave it to her. So we're talking about balance, I think. I think that's a real good point, and I got a lot out of that. I can use it, definitely.
That's good. Let me emphasize some of these points that Charles Fillmore talks about. And I hope you're reading the prosperity book and the spiritual economics book. Some of these sections on giving are really quite beautiful. I want to give some of this is one of the things that Charles Fillmore says. In this edition, it's on page 138. When anyone puts God first in their finances, not only in thought, but in every act, by releasing their first fruits, a 10th part of their increase or income, to the Lord, his faith in omnipresent supply becomes 100-fold stronger, and they prosper accordingly. That is, that in the act of giving, their faith actually increases. I want to give some of the principles that he shares here, because we don't give in order to somehow manipulate God. We give out of a sense of love, out of cheerfulness, and I do believe in that whole notion of feeling a sense of, how do I want to put this, that I'm a part of this team. I'm a part of this. And so it makes sense, like if I'm a part of this spiritual community or some other spiritual community or some other movement or project that I believe in, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If I really believe in something, to not support it, that doesn't make sense to me. I believe if we really, really believe in something, we want to also support it and help give to it. I'm looking for some of these principles. Pardon me while I look for it. That's the problem, because I don't make notes. I just try to remember it all. Okay, this is on page 134. In a plan of giving, that it may be successful, there must be certain things to be observed. First, there must be a willing mind, right? Of course, you want to give willingly. And then he says, secondly, the giving must be done in faith. So we're giving, from our heart, from faith. And then on page 135, a third requisite is the offering shall be a just and fair proportion of all that one receives. So we're giving based on how much we're blessed. And I think that's part of why giving for me helps me to be grateful. Because I'm thinking of all I'm grateful for, so I want to give in proportion to how I've received. But that seems impossible. I've received so much. How can I give in proportion to that? I've received so much love. I've received so much education. I've received so much in the way of relationships and various things in my life. How can I possibly give in proportion to that? And so my life is devoted to trying to give in proportion to all I've received, knowing that it's perhaps impossible, but trying to give in the way that others have given to me, people who gave to me, who believed in me and loved me when I was a stinker. I owe them I owe them a lot, you know? Yeah, Jessica.
Okay. Hi. I don't want to change the mood because it's
can.
so nice. But I just want to say that I have been the recipient of some nice giving, but it turned pretty negative when I was reminded that it was a sacrificial thing, that, look at all that I...
So there were strings attached.
And right. And I guess the response that I was not what, was I don't know what it was, but I didn't know there were expectations and like you said, something that I needed to do. And so all of my receiving then now becomes suspect, I become suspicious of, because I've been reminded that
what are the strings?
It's sacrificial. It's like, and sometimes the word was even used, look at what I sacrifice, that word. It's like, then I would say, hey, you know what? Don't sacrifice. I don't want it. That, it was one of those things that at what point, how do you know what is really being given in good faith? You mentioned giving in good faith. How do you discern that? Because it's a two-way thing.
That's a very good question. Very good. I don't know. Maybe some folks want to respond to that. Joanne?
I just see giving and receiving is reciprocal, and taking and obligating is a whole nother.
That's a whole other.
That's a whole
thing.
nother game. And the other thing that has been coming to mind is Khalil Gibran.
Yeah.
When he talks about life giving unto life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it is, basically. It's what forms of life giving to other forms of life. It keeps everything alive and growing and being healthy and happy and loving.
There's others who want to respond, and I just want to respond real quickly. If someone gave something to me, but there were strings attached, they didn't truly give it. But there are those who have truly given. And somewhere at the heart level, I knew that they were giving it. Somewhere on the heart level, I knew it was not manipulation, but it was truly giving. Mary?
I think most people have given to you probably from their heart and not with strings attached. But it's like the poison one always sticks in your mind. And it makes you suspect of everyone. And rather than, focus on that, maybe one of the things that you might want to do now is just think about all the people who've given you the gifts that they haven't put strings to. And kind of isolate that person in your mind. They are not typical of the people around you. They're the exception to the rule. And I hope they're out of your life. Because you don't want to and you don't need that. We have to sometimes put people away, put them aside, put them behind us to go forward, particularly if they run a number like that number on you. But I'm sure the majority of people in your life are giving freely and from love.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary.
So when you receive, you're taking it, you're receiving it. So should there be an obligation? Are you obliged in any way? What is the responsibility of the receiver or the one that's taking that?
To say thank you? Well, and I would say, of course, we're talking in generalities here, but I'm thinking of things that people gave to me that were of tremendous value. And I'm not talking not necessarily about monetarily, but giving of themselves. And they weren't expecting anything other than for me to respond from my highest self. They were leaving it up to me what I wanted to do with it. for them, like Keith was sharing earlier, the gift was in the giving. And what I did with it was my business, but they were hoping that I would take full advantage of it. And they could see various times in my life that there were forks in the road. I could have gone some other directions. And they knew that. But they gave fully and freely, trusting that my highest self would win out. Yeah, Keith?
Yeah, we're back to reciprocity and balance and the fair proportion. I can't get into that. I find that sometimes when I get caught into that, I don't see the gift that is already there because I got into reciprocity and balance and fair proportion. There was a gift there. And when I get caught into those three things, I don't see the gift. And to me, that's, I don't recognize it. So I think that I disagree with the fair proportion. If I give, I should get so much. That's having a balance sheet. And I don't keep a balance sheet in how much I give. I've already, it doesn't matter whether I even get, I'll get it eventually, it doesn't really matter because I've already been given the gift in giving. And it doesn't matter whether it's a string attached. That's their problem. I've already been, I don't even look for being paid for. The joy of giving is enough for me in of itself.
Right.
So sometimes the expectation or the judgment, I don't see the gift. It's already there.
I'm talking about the joy of receiving.
I don't see the gift I don't see the gift in receiving already there because I had certain expectations, and it wasn't what I thought that they should give and all that stuff. When maybe they just didn't have the ability or the capacity to give me in the way that I thought.
Yeah, what I was talking about was there are people who've given so much to my life. I don't know how to put this. I'll just put it the way it comes from my heart. I feel like I owe them something. Not that there were strings attached, but because they've done so much for me, it's helped call me to my higher self. That when someone has really laid down their love for me, there's a power in that. Yeah, I could choose. A person could choose to reject that, but there's something about something that is really given in love that calls to us. One of the times I was in India, I was all dressed in white, how I was typically dressed there. And we were coming through this area where they were celebrating a 100-year anniversary at a Shiva temple. And so they were using this real red substance. If you've seen pictures of India, they'll smear it on themselves and on each other. And here we are, Westerners all dressed in white as can be. And this little boy sees me. He's an absolute joy. This is in South India, and very dark skin. And so his bright teeth, just the contrast was amazing. And this little boy, he's running up to me, and he's got this red all over his hands. I thought, okay, here we go. And he runs up to me, and then he stops because I think he's thinking, is this okay? I mean, this tall white guy, and he's on white, and he's wanting to share with me. He's wanting to give. And I'm thinking how much I would cheat myself by not receiving it, And so, yeah, I'm all in white, but, all I had to do, if you've traveled in India, I just went, and then here it came. He put so I lowered down so he could put the red all over my face. And the delight in his laughter and in his eyes was priceless. And when someone reaches out to me in love, it touches my heart and makes me want to be the best that I can be. You know, it calls that response in me because it touches and opens my heart. I'm thinking, if this kid in the streets wants to give so freely to a guy he's never met, that opens me up. And I want to think about, how can I give to others as well? Yeah. Thank you. Jan?
So if I understand correctly, your question was in the difference between receiving and taking. And they are very, very different. And I think that you know which one you're doing. If you are taking something, that's an action on your part of pulling toward you. And receiving is with an open hand, and the gift is given. Do you see what I'm saying? I don't get the feeling that you understand what I'm saying. If I have a piece of bread and you reach out and take it from me, that's going to be different and feel different than if I hand you a piece of bread, right? But there's a different energy involved, and it has to do with you more than the other person. So if you are taking something, I mean, it has feelings of like maybe I don't deserve it. It has feelings of, it isn't mine, but I'm taking it anyway. So, I mean, I'm using the example of like a piece of bread because it's so obvious, right? The difference between taking it and being given it, right? When it's being given to you, you receive it. And receiving is being open and receptive, letting the thing come to you. Whereas taking is more of an active reaching out on your part. And I think the sense that it doesn't belong to you is part of what is confusing. Do you see what I'm saying? I don't think it's reciprocal in this because I think that it has to do with the person who's doing it. So you can receive something from someone and you can take something from them. And it has to do with whether you think that they want you to have it, whether they're extending it to you, whether you're reaching out and taking it from them. So it's a different action. It's just a very different feeling, different energy when you are taking something than when you're receiving it.
I know, thank you, Jen. I know that sometimes when I have been receiving something from someone, I don't know, maybe we have a way of checking it out, and they tell me, if I say, oh, are you wanting this back? I'm kind of sometimes checking out the motive, and their response will tell me a lot. Like, no, this is for you. I felt called to give this to you. My heart led me to give this to you. Something told me that I need to share this with you. So I kind of check it out, because I want to see, is this giving and receiving, or is this loaning and taking? Is this, what is this? So, but there's nice ways, I think, to do that. And when people see some hesitancy in me, typically they assure me, no, this is totally a gift. And in those, at least in, it's pretty rare in my life anymore that someone tries to give me something with some strings attached, because and I was thinking about that since you asked the question. I think it's because I'm not open to that, and so I don't receive it. So it tends not to happen to me. Yeah. Yeah, Joanne?
I've been thinking about if somebody presented something to me and I received it with goodwill and good feelings and appreciation, and then I learned out later that this person had feelings that they had sacrificed a lot, and then I should feel responsible for their feelings of sacrifice. I say, well, when I received it, I really loved receiving it. And thank you so much, and I'm sorry that you felt, would you like it? So that you don't have to feel badly because it's their issue. Mm-hmm. It isn't your issue. So you can, I think we can say, well, I've really enjoyed it, and I'm so sorry that you felt, that you were having to sacrifice for this, because that was not my intention. So you're not, don't have to be in effect of their behavior, is I guess what I'm trying to say, right. If that makes sense.
That's good. Thank you for bringing it up. Thank you for bringing it up. I think that's a real good thing to ponder. And to ponder, when we give, are we expecting something in return? So, okay, I'm going to get into it now. And there's times in the church where people have said, well, I've given this much, and I expect this in return. And this is not entirely rare. Okay? So, it's like, at that moment, I think, from where were they giving? Were they giving from that sense of expectation and that sense of, basically one time in a church, and I've pastored several, so you don't know where. Once upon a time in a church, there was a man who informed me that he was considering whether to come back to church or not. And, of course, since he was considering whether or not to come back to church, his wallet was considering whether or not to give. Right? And, where do we give from? Okay, you're asking the question about, okay, where are they giving from? I'm asking us, where do we give from? Do we give from a place of love? I remember giving at a church, and someone came up to me and said, I am so mad because I found out this and that was done with our tithes. I said, oh, okay. Well, I was giving to God, so I'm good. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have some responsibility to really know what we're doing with our finances. That's not my point. My point is, in my giving, I was giving to God. Now, some people might say, oh, you can't. Well, to me, that's what I'm giving to. That's my motivation. Just speaking for myself. I'm giving to God. And yeah, I want people who have the best interests of the church and who are doing their due diligence to, really know how our money is being used. But once in a while, I once had a church leader. Okay, this is another one. Once upon a time, I had a church leader that I talked with, and he went to a particular church where once upon a time I had been a pastor. And he said, as soon as I got there, this person, so-and-so, started telling me how much money they had and how much property they had and how much they give to the church. I mean, as soon as he met him. And it was obvious to this church leader that this person was saying, these are the strings that are attached to my giving. And I question, is that in the fullest sense of the term, giving? In the fullest sense of the term, in the way that Fillmore and Butterworth are talking about giving, is that really giving? It's buying. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. It's buying. And it is sort of a business-like relationship. Like, I suppose in their mind they're thinking I'm like a shareholder, and it's like I'm purchasing stocks in this church, and I expect things to roll my way. So I can see a certain business point of view, but it's not giving in the sense that we're talking about. It's buying. Yeah. Keith?
Yeah, it seems that this whole discussion right now has been on giving.
That's what I'm talking about tonight.
But I'm talking about, but I'm talking about receiving. Of just being able to receive gratefully,
yes,
without obligation, without guilt. And for many years, I was brought up to be a very modest person. It's better to give than to receive, and that's just too expensive. I can't accept that gift, because it's just, I don't deserve it, and they, it's a sacrifice for them, and allowing for me to receive any kind of gifts with no obligation, and even if they're expensive, great. But why not? Because they really wanted to, and
Thanks,
I missed out on some really good stuff, because I wouldn't. It was too expensive, and even though I know they worked, but still, they wanted to give to me, and they didn't expect anything like that, and that's why I think that if we could get into receiving too, with no obligation, and accepting it gratefully and joyfully, rather than, we've been talking about giving, but to receive, and this is a prosperity class, to receive prosperity, and to me, to focus on that and to receive, we've gone over giving for an hour, and I think it'd be good for us to get into receiving, and that's why I'm here, receive more prosperity in the many forms. But for me, the greatest gift is someone's time, their friendship, their love, their kindness, their trust. Those things you can't buy. That's what I really value, in addition to all the expensive gifts, but or whatever they want to give. But those things are more meaningful to me than something that I can put in my hand, because it goes to my heart. So I think it would be good if we got into the joy of receiving. We've gotten into the joy of giving, but the joy of receiving from another person, and what they have, their capacity to give at that time.
Right.
That's the important part.
And we can't receive if they don't give. It's all one. It's all one.
Receive it, but we're receiving with a sense. What like you came up with buying, okay? So what would we call receiving if, as I'm receiving, I'm not taking, I'm receiving it, but in the receiving I'm feeling like I don't really deserve this, and I don't really appreciate it in the sense of with an open heart. I'm still feeling I'm the one that's feeling being obligated back. Like, so now I owe them a 9-course dinner or something. Yeah. So what would that, we need another word there. Just like, Kara, you have a word?
She has a word.
I'm on the same wavelength. Just, here's a part. I'm remembering this night. I'm going to actually get personal on this one just because it was so dramatic. I was remembering this night where I asked my mother if she needed something. Now, my mother was raised in a generation where women didn't have a self. I was like the first generation of women to have a self. And that took a long time before I even realized. And so she said, no. She said no. And then I think I didn't bring her some water. I had some water. And then she got upset. And it was just so odd. I mean, my mother's not like this, but it was such an odd night. And I guess it was, hitting the psychologist in me, that if you don't have a self, you can't receive, nor can you ask for what you want. And so because she couldn't ask, because she didn't have a self, she couldn't ask and she couldn't receive. Then what happened is there was sometimes, my mother didn't do obligation, but there would be, I have had friends who gave with strings attached, and then there'd sort of be an obligation, and I'd be feeling guilty, like, wow, this is really strange, because it's that other dynamic. I like, taking and obligating. And then the other part of that was the only way, here's the kicker, that they could receive was by kind of creating guilt. It was the undercurrent, because they couldn't say, I want it, I demand it, I this. But through the guilt induction, they could receive it because then no one said anything. It's kind of like the old mother who, through guilt, then goes, oh, now I'm loved. And they're in control. So it was really, I guess that's why I had to become a psychologist. But I just remember that night because
we all have reasons for what we've done. Yeah.
The other thing I just want to say is two very quick things. I remember, and this was when after I kind of woke up to spirit and I was being really blessed, and it was one of these strong thoughts that had a real guidance to it, and it said, this is interesting, it said, I thought of this when you were sharing, it said, you need to expand your joy capacity. And I started, and I said, my joy capacity is like this. And so I really started to expand it because I think spirit was just coming through, and in joyousness, it was extraordinary. So, and because that can really affect you even physically. The other quick thing, because it was somebody here, and I'll always remember them, is there was a time I couldn't really give too much financially. And I like giving, I just really do. So I was like, And I ran into this person who reminded me of a past life thing. And they started talking about volunteering. And I went, wow. And that's when my big move to volunteer at Unity started, and it's never stopped. It's just so incredible. And some people, here's an interesting thing, tithe 10% of their day in volunteering, 2.5 hours every day.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Lauren, did you have your hand up? A small thing?
I'm more aware now about even starting to put in little money for charity boxes at So Safeway, or in the Christmas I was able to, and then I buy cookies from the kids, and they're so happy.
There's a joy.
There is a joy. So
there's a joy in it.
I'm kind of touching on it. And
right. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. There is a joy in all of it. And I like what Keith was bringing up, because as a kid, and even as a young adult, there were times, as a young adult that it was easier for me to give than it was to receive. And, you know, my dad talked with me about that, and I think I've shared that if you don't allow me to give, then you're taking basically something from me. And it put it in a different perspective for me. But in order to really receive it, in order to really receive something, I needed to receive with my heart. For me, not in a greedy, sort of entitled way, but really appreciating and joyful and feeling good about receiving it, you know? I don't know. There's a little difference for me in how I receive things now. I can receive it fully. You're talking about that sense of self. It's like, okay, I can just receive this. And I think of what Levitt has been teaching me. Just say thank you. Just say thank you.
But you can't receive either if you don't think you're enough.
Right. You can't receive fully if you don't think you're enough. Yeah. Because there's not a self there to receive. Right? Yeah. A little bit. But yeah. That's beautiful. And so this is all an important aspect of prosperity. Giving, receiving, allowing ourselves to be in that divine flow. Sometimes I've received from people that I did not expect it at all, you know, because we never know what channels the divine is going to reach us through. It can reach us through all kinds of channels, all kinds of ways. And giving, I've noticed my giving can take on all kinds of different directions as I'm in that divine flow. And so more and more, instead of looking at giving and receiving in a dualistic way, I see that they're the same thing. Does that make sense? So, when I'm giving, I'm receiving. And when I'm receiving, when I'm truly receiving, I'm giving. Right? And that's what I mean by reciprocal. Maybe reciprocal isn't the best word, but I mean that it's all oneness. It's all one. Yeah, that it's, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just saying that when I do giving more like on a monetary or tithing, kind of thing, I'm always thinking, this is my money, my own now energy yield, and I'm giving to things and people that I want to, I'm telling the universe, this is what I value and want more of in my life, you know. Mm-hmm. And it's so great when there are things that we can optionally give to, like, you know, when you go to the grocery store, the electric bill, you sort of, there's a little bit, you know, not so optional. But the other things that are optional, it's like, oh, okay, now what really feeds me in life? What do I want to really tell the universe that I want more of and I want to thrive and everything? And then that makes me really happy for the giving, whatever it is.
Thank you. Beautiful. Keith had his hand up, and then I'll come back.
Yeah, I come from a sense of fullness when I know that I'm really connected to God. Then I come from a sense of fullness. So if I need something, I always ask God first. So I don't ask, to people who don't have the capacity, but I always ask God first on whatever it is that I need. Coming from that sense of fullness kind of fills me, so I'm not coming from emptiness or a sense of being poor, knowing that This is where I come from. This is where my needs are met. And there are many times where I don't even ask God for anything because it's enough. You know, people are always asking, but coming from a sense of fullness. But I always ask God first what it is that I need. And to me, that's important because then I come from, we'll say, an imaginable source. So to me, it's real important to come from that position of fulfillment. And I know in having that faith there.
Good. Thank you. Let's see, Catherine.
I want to thank you because I got transformed in that story with your father, and I saw that by you allowing him to give his love, you were giving. You were giving, and your receiving was giving, and that allowed love to flow, and that's oneness. I mean,
right.
It just dissolved the duality completely.
Right.
I just got transformed in that. So
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I want to also sometimes, God has wanted to give through me. So I might have my money too, but there are times God says, here, we're giving, this, or here, I'm giving you this because this is we're going to be using it for. So because it's in another sense, it's all God's money.
And it's all
There it
God
is.
energy.
It's all God.
Everything.
Yeah. So it's just, and the last thing, just another thing, I went to a financial officer at a church after my mother made her transition, and we were talking, and he had a wonderful piece of advice. He said, when you're making your will, the question you ask is, who do I want to say thank you to? And I just went, wow, that is so easy, just like the way you tithe. Who do I want to say thank you to? Of course, to the people who nourished and supported my spiritual growth. It was so easy after that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
He suggested, he didn't tell you had to put your money in.
Right.
He respected you as an individual and
Yes.
made a suggestion, which is just so powerful.
Yeah.
And we should be that way with children. We
Right.
don't allow them the opportunity to make their own decisions so much of the
Right.
time and experience the joy
Yeah, I
and the
loved-
excitement. That's wonderful. Thank you.
I loved those times when he did that with me. There were other times he didn't. But I loved those times when he did that. And here I am, first or second grader, and he's saying, maybe someday you'll want to do this. Maybe you'll want to give. Which set me on this course of thinking, is that something I would want to do? Do I believe in that? And if so, why? And, for a second grader to be doing that process, I think is, yes, that's true. That's true. That's right. So, quote? Oh, that's from our first class, where I was defining what metaphysical means, and it was different things that I was covering in the first class. It just happened to be up there. Sorry.
Something came to my mind that I wanted to share, and that was when my husband and I bought this house that we're in. We were counting pennies to see if we had enough money to put gas in the car to go someplace. We were kind of down to it. And we happened to have a neighbor who was very generous and kept giving lovely things to us. And I felt so terrible, like, oh my gosh, I was grateful, but I felt terrible because I felt I didn't have anything to give back. So then I made the affirmation and I wrote it down. I said, there is always something that I can give. And so I just started affirming that. And
I love that.
And what that did was it built me up inside, because I can really relate to your mother and that sort of thing. And then I would miraculously find things to give her. And it made me feel good, like we were friends, not like, like one up, one down, but we were equal friends. And
right.
It's just very
That's
helpful.
beautiful. And that affirmation again, how's it go?
There is always something I can give.
Let's all say that together. There is always something I can give. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, I had to let my mind open up because, I was, of course, just thinking of certain things, and I had to let it open up. And when it did, I could find other things. I'm like, I'm not limited. I am abundant. I am valid. I am okay.
Right. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, this has been a wonderful discussion, and I hope that you can continue to think about that whole aspect of giving, receiving, being in the flow of divine life. Now, last week I gave an assignment. Do you remember the assignment? Any of you? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. So last week I was giving an assignment, and I've been working on it for myself, but does anyone care to share? Yeah. He keeps asking, what was it? Yeah. Anyone want to share?
Our assignment was about set points, setting a point. If you want to be more prosperous, then begin to teach yourself, essentially, I guess, how to grow your set point. Because you've got a level that you're comfortable with. But if you want to have a little bit more, how do you...
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's very well said. What is a goal? And because Catherine had been sharing about, if you made goals real big, then it seemed for you undoable, so you would make it into a chunk that you could believe but would stretch you. So maybe it'd be $1,000 more. So I was asking as an assignment, okay, identify what it is you have as a goal that you want to bring more of into your life. What would that goal be? And Ernest Holmes would call it arriving at a new mental equivalent. So it's like we may be used to a certain equivalent, a certain level. If we allow ourselves to expand, what would that new... Hi, Eric. Good to see you. What would that new equivalent be? What would it be? Wow, that is one big bag of trash, man. We were just talking about abundance. You got quite a lot. That's great. Serving many people. Thank you for what you do. Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you. So, what is it that we want to experience more of in our lives? And is our language, is our behavior, are our intentions, our prayers in alignment with experiencing that higher equivalent or that greater expansion of what it is we want to experience in our lives? So what arrived for me, well, I won't go into all the details yet, but it was speaking to me throughout the week. This is what I'm seeking. This is what I'm opening myself to allow, because I know it's already here. It's all here already. So I'm just allowing myself to receive this. And then looking at what are the patterns, the thoughts, the things that I'm doing, the words, the intentions, are they in alignment to receiving that?
And your feeling, can you feel it?
Okay, all right.
I think I'm speaking for myself. I get in my mind a lot, and sometimes I forget to feel.
Mm-hmm.
So what would it feel like?
Yes.
If I
like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
And that can be uncomfortable sometimes. You think you can do it,
No,
but
that's
the
a
feeling
good
goes,
way
well,
to do it.
Yeah, but to feel.
I like it. And at the Unity meetings, what we did was a process of backcasting. You've heard of forecasting? You know, like you predict something that's going to happen, like forecasting the weather or forecasting financial conditions or forecasting something that's going to happen in the world. What we were doing in the meetings was backcasting. So we were placing ourselves in the year 2030. And we were looking back at this time and looking at, oh, we're so grateful we did this or created this and that so that we could arrive at this place where we now are. So we're feeling our way into being already there, and then looking back, what had to happen in order for us to get there? That's called backcasting. And for me, that's easier. When I try to forecast, I'm trying to force something. I'm trying to look into the future. But when I'm in the in that moment, whatever it is I'm imagining, whether it's $1,000 more, or in my case, it's something more abstract but very, very necessary. And so it's more important to feel, okay, being there, and then what had to happen in order for me to get there. You know? Backcasting. Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, good. Good.
I'm going to try that.
Yeah, try that.
Now, I did something that you might find very silly, but what I did is this week, I had some really big hurdles. Big hurdles. I mean, that, you know, I couldn't even conceptualize what my set point needed to be to reach those hurdles. But what I did do is when I spoke to God, I said, God, you know, I know that you are the supply of it all. I know that everything's already done. You know, I looked at the principles. But then I said, could you put your divine light on me like a spotlight, right? And open all channels of abundance so they can find me. So like, here I am, spotlight, spotlight. Just in case I miss some, they won't miss me because there's a spotlight on me. So all the channels of abundance start finding me. So my huge hurdle will be at least, I would say tomorrow, taken care of for this month.
Wow.
Yeah, just in that 1 week. So I just said, because sometimes we're so caught up in things that we miss channels of abundance. Yes. So I figured, okay, it's in God's hands. So could you just, you know, shine the light on me so they don't miss me. So that's kind of what I did.
That's beautiful. Wow. Thank you, Joy. Wow. Keith?
Well, you know what I did for the assignment is, without even thinking about it, I made a God bucket list. I brought everything, she will say, that I actually put it in form by writing it down. And I kind of, all the things that I wanted for prosperity. And then after that, because I have like 2 ways or various ways, I started writing letters, because I write letters to God. I even put a stamp on some of them. And I put them in the mailbox. I really do. And I wrote like 10 of them. It was real clear. And sometimes, you know, during the day I have a God song with the lyrics and the melody that I sing to God, in addition to prayer and meditation, which is really fun. But to me, it's putting it from, we'll say, the invisible to the visible. That I've written it down, and it shows that I am serious enough to tell God, this is what I want. And, you know, to put it not, you know, which ones that I want the most, because I have enough sense to know what I would really, you know, what's important to me, but enough to do it. I think I wrote like 10 letters today, just to make sure. Wow. And I put them in different mail boxes, but I didn't want people to think I was crazy. I didn't really put my name, you know, or my address. But to me, it's important for me to bring it from, to God. I put to God, the Great Spirit, put the address. I don't put my address, but, you know, and, you know, I had a couple of stamps, but to me, it shows that I'm serious in bringing it out, to write it down, to put it out there, in addition to really using my imagination too, and also doing cutouts. But to me, that's, I wasn't even thinking about it. Yeah, I made a God bucket list.
I love
that.
that.
Was really cool.
Good.
Yeah, and it shows me that I am focused, and this is what I really want. This is what I'm serious about. And that's really nice to show that I have faith enough. And it's okay. I'm saying it's okay, God. If I don't get it, it's all right. I'm not, shows that I'm serious, but it's all right. If I don't get it right away, don't get it, I'm not going to cry about it too. It's that, there's a higher wisdom there in it also. Mm-hmm. What's best for me.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. And I was thinking as Joy was, that was so beautiful, having the light shine on you so that those avenues can find you. And I'm also thinking that light can help us then to see where those avenues are that we might not have ordinarily been looking for, because those avenues are always there. It's always there.
It's so intentional.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's go into a time of meditation. This has been awesome. And I love this. Did I hear someone say they're getting cold? That's so fun. I've been telling my Canadian friends that arrived yesterday, I said to them, now, you've arrived in winter. They're coming from Canada. And you may see some people wearing coats or things. We were having a great time. That's great. Okay, if you would get into a comfortable position. And take in and out a slow, deep breath. And as we've been reminded tonight, that's a great image for what we've been talking about. As we breathe in, we receive. As we blow out, we give. We're in this cycle, this flow of life. We just want to be open, receptive, responsive, in the flow of divine abundance. Open to give, open to receive, open to experience all of God, knowing that God is living itself as us. What an amazing journey. What an amazing privilege. What an amazing joy. So as we take a deep breath, we feel gratitude. We feel gratitude for all the ways in which our lives are blessed. We feel joy. We're so grateful. We give thanks for this time together. We give thanks for all the wonderful experiences, ideas that came to us throughout this class. Knowing we are on the path of prosperity, we open ourselves fully to being blessed and to being a blessing. Knowing this is one act, to be a blessing and to be blessed. Knowing that the presence of God is always giving. And so that presence living itself as us gives, receives, is in divine flow. We are grateful for abundance, grateful for health, grateful for harmony, grateful for peace in our lives. We are grateful. And when we are grateful, we are always prosperous. And for this we give thanks. And so it is. Amen. And if you wish to give, we have a basket. I'll just pass it around. Thank you. And thank you, Love Streamers, for joining us. Thank you for being a part of this journey of prosperity. And feel free to send us questions or comments. Anything that comes up for you in this class, we would love to hear from you. All right. Thank you. And we're sending the basket around. Oh, and if you're watching online, there's an opportunity to donate online as well if you would like to. Thank you, Keith. Yeah. That's right. Thank you so much. Namaste. All right, thank you.